Welcome to Everything to Everyone. My name is Franco, and in this first episode, I want to let you know what this project is all about, what I'm trying to accomplish with this project, and some of the ideas that were inspiration for this project's formation. One of the things that it was primarily inspired by was the fact that I worked retail, and in my many years of retail, I gained a lot of friendships with coworkers, and I'm a Christian, so when I would try to communicate some things that I was going through or some places that I was in my faith, I would find that the media that I would reference them to or some things that gave me great inspiration wouldn't necessarily connect with them because they didn't have the vernacular or vocabulary or jargon that many of these Christian media outlets were using. So I would spend late nights folding clothes and cleaning up sections of the store, and my mind would just run with these wildly unrelated concepts, and I would try to find ways to make those concepts intersect. Another one of the pieces of inspiration for this project was a book entitled Freakonomics by Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner, and they do something similar. They use statistics to kind of achieve a through line through wildly unrelated concepts. And I found it so interesting that things on opposite ends of spectrums, sometimes things not even on the same spectrum, they would find ways to come to conclusions using statistics. So I wanted to see if I could try to do the same thing with this project, use wildly unrelated topics, things in culture, things in science, things in psychology, wildly unrelated topics, and communicate one message. Another point of inspiration was a verse in the Bible in the book of 1 Corinthians. The Apostle Paul writes this. He writes, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some." And if you don't know much about the Bible and some of the terms that I mentioned, that's completely okay. The point that the Apostle Paul is trying to make is that his message remains the same, but the packaging must remain amorphous. It must change and be fluid. And this is true in every communication that we have interpersonally. If I'm talking to a music executive, the terms and the jargon that I use ought to be well suited and appropriate for his understanding. Not because I have a low level of value or esteem for his understanding, but rather there are certain touch points and concepts and viewpoints and worldviews that he is more connected to than others. So my communication has to change in order to reach him effectively. Ultimately, I'm still trying to get the same things across, but I'm using different concepts and different ideas to do so. And that's really what this project is all about. That line that the Apostle Paul wrote, "I become all things to all people." Well, my hope is to use everything with the hope of reaching everyone. And some of the concepts and ideas that I'm trying to use in order to do so are things like video games, Super Smash Bros. Melee, streetwear, psychology. All of these different types of things ultimately result in different packaging, different ways of getting the same and one united message across. You may ask yourself why I would use this kind of idea of different amorphous packaging when the wisdom has been conventionally packaged for millennia with great effect. Well, while the ideas and concepts that capture people's attention may vary, one thing has proven to be extremely effective in capturing and communicating truth, and that is story. Robert McKee is an author and teacher of some of the world's foremost screenwriters, and he has this to say about story. They are the creative conversion of life itself into a more powerful, clearer, more meaningful experience. They are the currency of human contact. Now, Robert McKee is writing about stories from a secular perspective, things like Avengers Endgame and Dunkirk. And he says that these type of stories can have a profound effect on people. What I value about that quote is Robert McKee is talking about stories in a way that's just barely catching up to what Jesus understood about stories. As a matter of fact, so often throughout the Bible narrative, Jesus uses stories, or parables as they're most commonly known, to communicate and confer truth. Even beyond that, in Luke 13, Jesus brings up an event that would be sure to be on the town's newspaper headline if they had one. And he uses it to communicate the truth about the kingdom of heaven. Stories matter and stories travel. As a matter of fact, Carl Jung dedicated years of his life's work into distilling some of the core tenets of story, which he talks about in his archetypes. And archetypes are essentially the basic characters that transcend communities, cultures, language even. Now, Everything to Everyone is a work that's dedicated to using stories, concepts, cultural touch points in order to communicate one unified message. I hope you enjoy.